Today we're going to start talking about Otzar Bezin, and that is, as we well know, it's very hard to keep Shemittah. So there are different ways that people take care of that, deal with having to keep Shemittah. So there are people who got stuff from. They got stuff from Eretz Yisrael. We talked about people doing special malachas. Then we put some smarter, newer ideas they got from greenhouses and buying from Goyim in Eretz Yisrael and Hetem Chira. And now this topic, which is Otzar Bezin, is really something very old. It's not something new, as we're going to see in a second. But it's been reawakened and given a new direction, not the way it was sort of originally intended. In a way to keep you sweet. Okay, so where does come from? So the entire makar for this thing called Otzar Bezin comes from Tosefta, and Tosefta says like this: for Rishona, Bezin would sit by a Pischei Yaris. Bezin would sit around by the entrances of the cities, and they would take away people's produce as they came into the city. Okay, they would confiscate people's produce as they came into the city. Okay, and then the Tosefta says, then as each different item became available, the three things they're all the same. Each food became available. Bezin would hire workers, collect the produce, do what had to be done, and there's each thing to press it or squeeze it or whatever had to be done for the different items that were done, and put them into an Otzar Shabir, into so kind of a storehouse. Okay, and the Bezin took possession of all this produce, and they put it away. They put it into storage. And then what did they do with it? And then, as people needed it, the Machakalim, Irish Abbasas, each person got as much as they needed for their family. So you had 5 people in your family, so you got 5 portions of whatever of those things as people needed. Okay, so Tosefta says Bezin would take away all this produce, take all this produce that was around. Bezin would do what had to be done with it. They would hire people to do all kinds of work. The grapes are not so valuable because grapes are going to spoil, so you turn grapes into wine, etc., and things like that. And then the olives into olive oil. Each thing what had to be done to it. And then when it was the right time, they would hand it out to the people to distribute it equally to people. Okay, so there's an obvious question. This is the makar for what we call Otzar Bezin. It's sort of called here that Rabban calls it more clearly like that. And the question is like this: okay, there are Mishnayos, it's actually even Toseftas, but there are Mishnayos that say straight out that a person is not allowed to do all those malachas or many of those malachas that are listed there on the left side. Those malachas that they did, they would collect them, they would press them, and using a real press, exactly as it describes here in the Tosefta. Not every single one of them is a Beferish Mishnah, but some of them are mamash Beferish Mishnah. And even the ones that are not, doing malachas like that are things you're not allowed to do in Shemittah.
Some of them are Mishnayos, they're Psukim.
Some of them are Psukim? Okay, maybe. I don't know about that.
Okay, so
I'm coming to. I'm going to explain it. So the question is, so what's going on? It's bad enough if people do this, but Bezin should go ahead and promote it. Doesn't seem very appropriate for Bezin. Okay, so that's the question. That's the obvious question on this Tosefta. The Tosefta is promoting things that are usher to do in Shemittah. Okay, how could there be such a thing? Okay, so because of that, the Rashi Sivili, that's the Pirush on the Yerushalmi, the Arishan says, this Tosefta is not talking about Shemittah. Okay, even though it's in Shvius, it's not talking about Shemittah. This Tosefta is talking about Shishas. In the 6th year, Bezin would confiscate everyone's produce, and the reason why they did that was so that during Shemittah there'd be food for people to eat. People are going to have nothing to eat. So during the 6th year, Bezin went around taking everybody's stuff, and then, what do you say? Like Yosef, okay. Like taking everybody's stuff, and then they went ahead and the distribution was during Shemittah. That's why it's in Shvius. This is just not a communist, This is during, they took it in the Shishas so that they could give it out during Shvius, the people should be able to have it. Okay, the Tzef doesn't say a word about Shemittah there. I mean, it's in Shvius, you guessed that it's Shemittah, but no, Rashi Sivili says it's not true, no such thing. Okay, that's how we learn it. So according to the Rashi Sivili, what we have of Otzar Bezin doesn't exist. What we call Otzar Bezin doesn't exist. This Otzar Bezin is during the Shishas. Okay, now, there's an obvious question back on him, on the Rashi Sivili. He didn't really solve the problem because, he solved the problem, but he made things worse because, Chazon Ish says, where does Bezin have a right to steal people's produce. Bezdin decided in the 6th year. Yeah, okay, yes, we call it Hefker, Bezdin Hefker. That's true. I'm not saying what's the technical right, but why would Bezdin come up with such a thing? They say, you know what? We feel bad for people doing Shemittah. We're going around taking away everybody's produce. So you're right, it will be a Hefker, Bezdin Hefker. He says, but it seems very radical that Bezdin should go around saying we need food for people for Shemittah. We're taking everybody's stuff during the Shisha so we can give it out during Shvias. Okay, obviously you're right. The Toseftas, according to the Rosh Hashanah, you're right. The Toseftas. It was a takon. People were starving, so Bezdin had no choice but to take. It's as if we're forcing people to give tzedakah. Bezdin took it away in the 6th year, so they have to give it in the 7th year. Okay, but Chazon says he's not uncomfortable with that, and most Rishonim do not know like that. Most Rishonim do not know like the Rosh Hashanah. They learn that during Shvias. This was done during Shvias. Okay, so this is as it seems to be that it was done during Shvias. Okay, and they now have to answer the kasha. Answer the kasha that the Rosh Hashanah asks. He says, "How could Bezdin do this? You're not allowed to do these malachas on Shvias." So, the Chazon Ish again explains Pshat Nos Shana. He says like this: when the Torah says, you're not allowed to harvest. That's what Rabbi mentioned. You're not allowed to harvest during Shvias. He says the Torah doesn't mean you're not allowed to take the stuff off the tree. Of course you're allowed to. You're actually supposed to eat. You're allowed to, and you may even be supposed to eat the produce of the fruit. You're allowed to take fruit off. So the Torah says you're not allowed to harvest during Shvias. It doesn't mean you're not allowed to harvest. It means you're not allowed to harvest as if you're the owner. You're not allowed to harvest either go out with a combine and take all the produce off the tree because you're showing that it's not hefker. You're doing it as if you're the owner. And that's what the Torah doesn't want. If you want to go ahead and take an apple off the tree, it's 100% you're allowed to do that. You're not allowed to go around and do it in the way that an owner does it. And therefore, if the person is, the only issur for a person to harvest like that is when the owner does that. If I come, it's my field, I go around doing all the harvesting, I'm the on the issur. But if Bezdin comes and does it for everybody, so it's just an efficiency to do it in the more, sophisticated ways. And the Melachas D'Rabbanan that are also listed there, that are Asur D'Rabbanan, are all for the same purpose, which is you're making it as if it's yours and you're the owner of it, and which is you're not supposed to be doing. And therefore, if Bezdin is doing it for everybody, if Bezdin is doing it, then it doesn't have the Isser. Or a variation of the same thing is that the Isser to harvest in huge quantities is because you're supposed to be harvesting for your current use. If you harvest all that stuff, again, it looks like an owner, but Bezdin is really harvesting for thousands of people. Bezdin is harvesting for everyone in town. So if there's 500 people in town, and every person could take 3 apples, well then Bezdin could take 1,500 apples. And all of a sudden, they're taking all those apples as not taking it for one person taking more than he's supposed to. They represent many people. Okay? 2 variations of the same idea. Okay? And that's the reason why, that would be the basis for why, even though a regular person is not allowed to do these, all these malachas regular people are not allowed to do, but Bezdin is allowed to do them. Okay,
so a regular person could do it as long as he's not doing it for long-term purposes.
Correct.
Right.
If he's
otherwise, the Isser precisely is this. The Isser is doing a Otzar. If you're going to be doing a Otzar, but if you're doing a Otzar, it should be here. Bezdin is doing
which is
Otzar, then it's okay.
Yes, correct. Okay, the Chazon Ish even makes it more as if it depends on being an owner versus a non-owner, but whichever way you say, but either way, there's different ways to say the same thing. But the point is, all those Mishnayos about malachas that you're not allowed to do, the pasuk about the malachas that you're not allowed to do, that's an issur for the owner, for the person, rather than just, if Bezdin is doing it for the public, then that's okay. Okay, so now, what comes out is that according to, we'll call it the Ramban, who reads the Tosefta the simple way, the Ramban Zuchomish, the Tosefta is teaching us a chiddush that Bezdin is allowed to do certain malachas that individuals are not supposed to do. According to the Rosh Hashanah, there's no such makar. Okay, there's no such makar. The Tosefta is talking about shishas. It's not talking about Shemitah at all. So according to the Ramban, there's a makar to this concept. According to the Rosh Hashanah, there is not, which is to say that according to the Rosh Hashanah, you would not be allowed to, what we're going to discuss, called what we talk about, what we call nowadays an Otzar, which is the same thing. There's no makar to that according to the Rosh Hashanah. He does not hold to that. He would not hold to such a thing. He has no makar that you're allowed to do something. And according to the Ramban, and which is what we do, this except is the makar to that to do that sort of thing. Okay. Now, there's a question whether why the Rambam doesn't bring this in. Here, this Tosefta is not brought in the Rambam. Okay, it's a question of why doesn't he mention such a thing. So the Rabbi Ramon told us that he would understand. Well, actually, let me go back up 1 second. Okay, the Radvaz on the Rambam, on the page, has two answers. He says the Rambam either doesn't bring it because he doesn't hold to it, okay, or he doesn't bring it for, I'll tell you what his other reason is in a second. The answer to it's whether he does or doesn't hold to this. So, Rabbi Ramon said that the reason to think why the Rambam might not hold of this Tosefta is because, I don't know if you noticed it, I tried to put it by itself, the Tosefta starts off with the word Barishona, okay, in the beginning, okay, and it's a little odd. Why does it say Barishona? They used to do this thing. So Rabbi Ramon said, Kenzai that the Rambam learned, that Barishona meant, when before the Chachamim made all the takonas of things you're not allowed to do, a lot of the Bidorach, Bagas, a bunch of those things that were there that the Ferishim Shemittah you're not allowed to do, originally they used to do this. But once the Chachamim made takonas about certain things being Otzar, then they stopped. In other words, really this was a good plan while there were only the Isurim Deraisa to think about. But once it got to the point that there were specific Isurim D'Rabbanan to learn, to be Dorach Bagas, that's a specific Isurim D'Rabbanan, it's a mission, not allowed to do that, then they stopped doing this thing. So they have to just tell you something historical, but it's not true anymore. That would be a reason why the Tosefta would not be halacha, because the word Barishon is to tell you that this din is not halacha. That's how he says. But others on the page don't learn that pshat. They have other pshatim now, just take what they mean. Other pshatim in the word Barishona, and that is the Ramban says that the reason why they made this din of Otzar Beis was this Otzar Beis was created was because they found that people were keeping their produce and not letting anybody take it during Shemittah, or they were doing schar with that produce. So Beis Din was concerned. The owners of the field weren't treating their fields like they were supposed to do in Shemittah. So Beis Din had to force them to do it. So Beis Din took away their produce from them, and Beis Din then distributed because this is doing it. We're going to do all these grapes. So they gave it out to people. But it was because people were not doing what they were supposed to do. So Beis Din had to step in and enforce Shemittah for the farmers, and therefore Beis Din to stop the farmers from holding on to the produce by themselves. And therefore, it was only Barishona when there was such a problem. That's when Beis Din did that. In later years, when farmers were not were doing the right thing, then they stopped doing that. Okay, so they learned a different shot in the Barishona. Okay, there are other shots also. We'll pass on it. Okay. I have to just tell you that what I just said to you from the Ramban is what the only shot that I saw in the Rishonim as to why this din of Otzar Beis was created, which is it was done to stop people from doing the wrong thing. Okay, stop farmers from holding on to their produce. And if that's true, you wonder, it may be a little bit more of a question why Ram doesn't bring it. Why doesn't he say that there's such a takana? Or maybe it's only for certain places. Maybe that's what the Bishayna means. Okay, but we could have learned, which is how a modern day person thinks of Otzar Beis in a different way than the Ramban says. We think of Otzar Beis not as a way to stop people from keeping ownership of their produce, but we think of it as a way to distribute produce. Okay, because we live in big cities. We think of it as, if a guy's got a farm that's got 1 million cherries growing on it, how's everybody going to get those cherries? How are we going to give out those cherries properly? Well, if a person has grapes, okay, well the din is, you're not allowed to, no one's allowed to press those grapes into and make them into wine in the normal way. You have to do it in an abnormal way. Well, what that's going to mean is all the grapes are going to go to the garbage. I mean, who's going to come around and squeeze the grapes in the way you're allowed to, beheter? So we think of it as an efficiency that Beis Din, since Beis Din's allowed to do this, that it's an efficiency that Beis Din comes along and does us a favor that it makes the grapes into wine and then sells us the wine. I mean, if it was up to us, first of all, I'm not allowed to do many of these malachas, and I don't know how to make wine either. So basically, the grapes are going to go to the garbage. So we think of Otzar Beis as a benefit to the consumers, as help us by giving us all this food. It helps do all the processing that it needs to do to get me my food. But that's not the Ramban. I don't know if others are.
There's a lot of sellers.
What do you say? I'm getting to the selling in a second. I'm going to get that in a second. But we think, just this point is, we think it's an efficiency. The Ramban says that's not the point here. The takana of Otzar Beis is not to help consumers, it's to prevent farmers from doing the wrong thing. Okay? I'll get into your thing in 1 second. Okay? So, there's a Tosefta. I don't know when the Tosefta was written. Well, let's get a historian. Many hundreds of years ago. But from the time of Tosefta until 150 years ago, there's a Ramban in the middle of the Ramban and Chumash talks about it. But you didn't hear much of anybody ever doing the Otzar Beis. Okay, there is a record about it. There is actually Yerushalmi mentions an Otzar. It doesn't call it Otzar Beis, but it talks about putting food into an Otzar. And it seems to be referring to the same idea of an Otzar Beis, as Yerushalmi talks about it. the Yerushalmi doesn't say all these details. So then the Rosh Hashanah would be happy with that Otzar. Okay, the Yerushalmi talks about an Otzar. Well, maybe the Otzar, the Beis Din took the stuff, the heter, the way they were allowed to, and put it into an Otzar, just as a storehouse to keep the stuff for everybody. Okay, it doesn't say that they would derech bagaz and did all the things that you're not allowed to. It just says it wasn't an Otzar. Okay, but there isn't much mentioned that there was such a thing as anybody doing Otzar Beis Din until in Tov Reish Ayin, okay, when Rav Kook was in Eretz Yisrael, and he spoke lots about Shemittah, if you can imagine. It was a Shemittah of Tov Reish Ayin, and he said, I have an idea. He says, instead of Beis Din doing this to prevent farmers from holding on to their produce, or instead of it just being an idea of just a way to give out produce, he said, what we should do is, it says Beis Din used to be soicher poyalim for all these jobs. He says, so why don't we be soicher the farmer? Okay, the farmer not only does he know what he's doing, this is his field. He knows how to take care of cherry fields. He knows how to take care of them, but also he's desperate for some parnasa. He needs the money. So Beis Din would be soicher poyalim. Let's be soicher the farmer himself. And what we'll do is, we'll hire him to do the harvesting and all the processing and the packaging and delivering it to town. He'll do all those jobs, and then he'll charge for his malacha, not for the fruit. Okay, what you say. You're not allowed to charge the fruit for his hefker. The fruit has kedusha shvius, and it's hefker. You're not allowed to charge for it. He won't. He'll charge just for what he did, which he was allowed to do. He's allowed to deliver it to town. He's allowed to put it into bags, and whatever has to be done to the cherries to make them suitable, to make the grapes into wine. All those malachas he could charge for, and he always does. If you think about it, usually the price of the wine is partially for the grapes, but partially for everything that goes for turning a grape into wine. So he's let charge for the bottle and for the bottling and for the squeezing, all the things that he does to make the thing. And so Rav Kook says, let's give the farmer some parnasa. So we'll have what to eat, but in his concern was more for the farmer. We'll help the farmer by turning the farmer into the pile. Okay, it was a very good idea. Okay? It didn't go very far. Okay, not much happened. He brought it up, and I think there were a little bit of Otzar Beis Din, but it didn't happen very much. Well, there were actually, whoever was there, they were really trying to help those people, So, but it wasn't like, it didn't become a big to-do that should happen. It like sort of got a second wind when the Chazon Ish was talked about Shemittah in Tafshin Hay and Tafshin Yud Beis. Okay, it was the last two Shemittahs Chazon Ish was alive. The Chazon Ish pushed it more, using the same idea that Rav Kook had said, which is give the farmer the parnasa by having him do this work. We'll pay for everything other than the fruit, and the farmer will have some parnasa. We'll have what to eat. Okay, next time we're going to talk about the pricing. Okay, exactly how they price it. It's all the fruit. We're going to talk about that next time.
They price the malacha, whatever.
How they charge for whatever they charge it, yes. We'll talk about that, a drop just today, but more tomorrow. More next time. Okay? So now, this kept on growing, and Otzar Beis Din has continued to go from then, from the Chazon Ish, like this second wind that it got. It's been growing, and it got to, you'll call it either a high point or a low point, whichever one you want to call it, 2 Shemittahs ago. Okay? Taf Shin Samach Aleph, okay, 2 Shemittahs ago, which was, at that time, Tenuva, which is a huge conglomerate in Eretz Yisrael. At that time, they were into produce. Tenuva is a big cooperative, and they made an Otzar Beis Din, their own Otzar Beis Din. So what they were doing was, all the people who were supplying them produce in Tafshin Samach, all of a sudden Tafshin Samach Aleph were part of an Otzar Beis Din. And they had this huge structure of an Otzar Beis Din, which was the Beis Din hired all these people to do malachas that they were allowed to, under the direction of the Beis Din of what they were allowed to do in their fields, and they were going to provide produce to loads of people in Eretz Yisrael, get paid a certain amount for their malacha, but not get paid for the fruit, and it was going to be, here was very, so this is a huge step for Otzar Beis Din, huge step for keeping Shemitah, that Tenuva was promoting this, okay? So it was either a high point, or this so far we're at the high point, okay? Then the only problem was, they lost 10 million shekel, okay? It flopped. Okay, I don't know if it flopped completely, but they ended up losing 10 million shekel, and that might have even driven them out of the produce business. Okay, it ended up being a flop. Okay, and the reason is because the consumers weren't ready for it. Okay, consumers, if I came to you and said, would you like to buy an Otzar Beis Din apple, or you want to buy an apple from Italy? Okay, so people shied away from Otzar Beis Din. Either they didn't know what it was, they didn't know how to keep Shemitah, whatever it was. So they were apprehensive about it. It didn't sell the way it was supposed to. Okay, So it ended up a little bit of, quite a setback for Otzar Beis Din. Not to say it keeps on going. It's this year even stronger than previous Shemittahs. But what happens like this? But because of this story, there was a change in how Otzar Beis Din's work, a downgrade for how they work, and that is as follows. Let's say the Beis Din decides that this apple farmer should be paid $1,000 for the work he's going to do for them for Shemittah. Okay, they figure out all the work he's going to do is worth $1,000. Okay. When he harvests all his apples, he ends up with 1,100 pounds of apples. That's what he ended up with. So Beis Din sits down and says, well, we paid $1,000. We have 1,100 pounds of apples. Let's say of those 1,100, we're going to sell 1,000 pounds. 100 pounds are just not going to get anything sold. So we're going to charge $1 a pound. We paid him $1,000 for all his work. We're going to sell 1,000 pounds of apples. So each pound of apple is $1 a pound. Okay, that's how Beis Din would have set the price. What would happen if Beis Din only sells 800 pounds of apples? Who takes the loss when you sell 800 pounds of apples? So the way it's supposed to be, which was the way it was until this Tenuva fiasco, was Beis Din takes the loss. Because the farmer was a poil. He was paid to do a job. If you work at a gas station, they pay $10 an hour. If you don't sell any gas, you still get paid $10 an hour. Doesn't make a difference. You don't get paid less because they don't sell anything. So what happened was, they made up a price. The guy's really a poil. They paid him by the hour. And then, or however they came up with their price for him. And then, when they didn't sell the produce, Tenuva was stuck with the laws. The Tenuva Beis Din, which was Tenuva. The Tenuva Beis Din was stuck with the laws. Basically, with Tenuva, that's how he lost the money. So what happened was, they said, no, okay, from now on we can't do it that way anymore. And for now, the Otzar Beis Din people don't get paid that way. Now, an Otzar Beis Din farmer is told, we're going to pay you $1,000 for your malacha. We figure out we're going to pay you $1,000 on condition that we get that much money. If we don't make $1,000 back, you only get as much as we get back.
Because they're only going to pay at the end. And
well, I don't know however they do that, and however they figure out exactly when they pay, but if we make more, you don't get it. If we make more, this is a ridiculous question. You can't say it's not chatzi skar and chatzi a loss. Here over here, Beis Din, if they sell 1,100 pounds of apples, Beis Din keeps that.
Who's the Beis Din?
I don't know who the Beis Din is. I don't know. That's already. Now you're talking about the
Beis Din has a serious finance committee meeting.
The rabbi they can, but the point was
the workers are going to have to bear the brunt of it.
But the problem is, but it turned the worker now into a partial owner. It turns the worker into an owner. The problem is that it has now a feel of a worker being more like an owner rather than being a worker, and he's supposed to be a worker. So it was a downgrade.
Not really. He's not getting the revach.
Right, he doesn't get the revach, and it's not really connected. It's not like when the money comes in, they split it up. They set a price for him. They said, your work is worth $1,000, and then they say, this is your salary. But if we're short, we won't give it to you. So it's
why can't they do it in a way that it's only because the problem is they can't predict how much they can sell. Well, if they be able to predict it, well, like a regular business has workers, and they probably work the way.
No. Not only is it a question of consumers, but it's a farm product. Let's say it doesn't rain that year. Let's say we get less apples or more apples, or let's say it's some other problem. So that we can't predict what's going to happen. So actually, some of the farmers say we like working for Beis Din and Shemittah because every year our how much we make is dependent on a million factors. Some years we make money, some years we lose money. When we work for Beis Din, we like to.
But make less money though.
Right, but no, some years farmers actually lose money. But let's say it doesn't rain. So if you work for Beis Din, you're being paid a salary, you shouldn't make difference how much it rains. Let's say we thought we were going to get 1,100.
If the estimate would be big enough, it should work.
Because you say because we make money on bananas and we lose on apples. Okay, so but it may or may not work. So anyhow,
that's what every business doesn't know. Right, you're right. Business, you do business, you take risks and whatever. They're cloud, you do it right, you make money.
That's if you're in business for yourself. But if you're a worker, you're just supposed to get paid a set salary.
No, so the problem is the Beis Din is not a business. The Beis Din is a bunch of rabbis. That's the problem. The Beis Din over here is a bunch of rabbis.
The problem is, that, as you said, that it's really making the worker more into a partner in the
business. Right. Okay. Okay. So
it's equity as opposed to salary.
But Lamaisa is even if this downgrade, the Otzar Beis Din continue to expand. Each Shemittah gets more and more, and it goes together. The consumers get more used to getting the stuff. The farmers get used to selling the stuff, etc.
Whose answer was it to change it this way? I mean, it really does present the problem. So
I don't,
who's behind the change? Which poskim?
That's a good question. The poskim involved with it are agreeable to it. I don't know if they promoted it. I don't know if they wanted it or they just went along with it. It's a part like a business decision. It was a.
I'm saying, is this published anywhere? Meaning, we have all of the, Sifrei Shvius. Is there anybody, talk about?
I didn't see it in print. No. it's a good question. No, so something changed when they had this huge loss. So afterwards, everyone got very apprehensive and said, whoa, I might be next. He lost 10 million shekel, I might lose 10 million shekel tomorrow. So people became, again, now, if you think about the way that Yosefta says it, it doesn't talk about charging people anything. It just says machal man. And because that l'chara is because Bezdin in those days didn't operate like this Bezdin. This is a kangaroo Bezdin. I'm saying this is a pretend Bezdin over here. These are just three guys who got given and says we're a Bezdin.
This being present company excluded.
the Bezdin over there was a functional Bezdin for everything. They were the city's Bezdin, so they hired workers because, however, they collected money from other things. This wasn't a business over here. It doesn't say over here that they charge people at all. Okay, that charging people is a new idea. Nothing wrong with it, but that doesn't say that because in the city they did lots of things. They didn't charge for giving people malchus either. They hired a guy. However, the Bezdin got their money. However they got their money, they got their money. Okay,
the community tax.
A community thing. However they decide. Okay, now a few little details before we finish about this stuff, which is. This produce has kedusha shvius. It's as kaddish as anything else is. It's just the Bezdin is delivering it for us, but it has kedusha shvius. However, the money that a person pays for this produce, they're not paying for the produce. They're paying for everything but the produce. Okay, we'll talk next time about how they set that price, but they're paying for everything but the produce, and therefore, all the rules about transactions of things with shvius, like all the isurei schara, all the questions about kedusha going out to the money, all that stuff doesn't apply to this produce. Okay, you could sell this by the pound, and you could sell it in a market. There's no kedusha on the money. That's all because everything you're paying for is everything that's not the fruit. Okay, if you buy a bottle of wine and you paid for the bottling and for the bottle and for the delivery truck, all those things have nothing to do with Shemittah. Okay, that's actually why you're allowed to pay for it. But because of that, you're allowed to all the rules, all the restrictions that come with sending back, buying and selling perish shvius don't apply to this stuff. Okay, a few other little things are like this. Rabbi Yashiv told people that if these people are operating as a Bezdin, then Bezdin can't operate in a field that's doing an Isser. So, for example, if the produce that they're growing is Klayim, then Bezdin has no right to do it. In other words, Bezdin is here as we have to remember, this is not just a distribution system, this is a Bezdin. So Bezdin should not be running in a field. They shouldn't allow Otzar Bezdin. If you want to grow apples, that's fine. You want to grow something that's an Isser of Klayim, Bezdin is not allowed to do that. Rabbi Shammai said,
I don't understand.
What's the Havmin?
What?
Okay, no. The Havmin is, the Havmin is.
You just tell us, the climate, what?
No. The farmer's coming and says, listen, I want to sell my produce to the public. I want to sell produce to the public. It's Shemittah, I'm not allowed to. Could you do me a favor? You hire me to give it out to them. So it's as if like they're not involved in the planting. Like you think Bezdin has nothing to do with what's going on in the field. They're just a distribution system. What if we wouldn't call this the Otzar Bezdin? If we call this the joint distribution community?
No,
they just be a committee of people who are just doing the work for the public. Let's say
if the Havmin is what you allow the farmer to plant Klayim.
Yeah, but let's say this. The three of you decide that you want to get grapes from a field of Hefker. No, it's a Bezdin. So this. You hire me. You say, okay, I'll give you $10. Drive to over there, pick me up some grapes, and bring them back. Okay, can you do that? Okay, it's actually nice about that. But could you do that? So you give me $10. Tell me to go pick up the grapes, and I bring them back for you. So do you care about Klayim? That's your business whether you care about Klayim or not. But you just hire. So that's what Bezdin is. You would think that the Bezdin is just an efficiency to collect the produce for people. So they're not calling them a Bezdin, but you wouldn't think of them as a Bezdin. You think of them as just some. Everyone's getting together and giving the guy $1 to pick up the fruit for them.
They're collecting. They're also selling it for the Bezdin.
What they're doing all those things just for the tzibur. We're hiring the guy. It's like a garbage man. It's like we're just.
It's perfectly fine to sell Klayim to the tzibur. What are you talking about?
Okay. Next. Okay. Rabbi Shammai says the following. He says, Bezdin has to remember that they're just giving out everyone's produce. He says, let's say they're, as we're going to hear in some time, they're doing an Otzar Bezdin for Esrogim. And they come across this really gorgeous esrog. So the person says, I want to save this esrog for the Rebbe. Okay, I want to put this one away for the Rebbe. So he said, you have no right to do that. He says, it's not yours. He said, these esrogim belong to the tzibur. Anybody who walks...
Why does it belong to the tzibur?
That's what it is. It's hefker. Right, it's hefker.
So I take it for myself.
So you can take it for yourself. Yes, you're right. So the guy can take it for himself and then give it to his friend. He could do that. Right. But Bezdin has set up a structure which is these guys are Poinalim. We hired them, and they're supposed to be giving it out. So for the guy to walk ahead and just say, "I've
It's not like any Poinalim might find them in Tzir. That's the whole thing. Poinalim might find them in Tzir.
No, he didn't find the material. What happens if someone's working in Hungarian and decides, oh my gosh, I have a great deal on something, I'm going to put it on the side, and when my friend comes by, I'm going to sell it to him. Nobody else can buy it. I'm going to put it on the side, not let anybody sell it. The owner says, what are you doing? We're running the store here. Whoever walks in is allowed to buy it.
It belongs to the owner.
Right.
The Beis doesn't belong to him.
But that's the point. It belongs to nobody. You don't have a right to put it aside and say, I'm saving it for somebody else.
Well, yeah. No, I'm saving it for myself.
So you say, but the Paul should do is, he should say, I'll pay the $1 now to buy that esrog. It costs money for the esrog, for all the malacha, so I'll pay the $1 now. Then okay. He didn't talk like that. He talked about just putting it aside. Okay. And also, while the Bezdin is doing this is doesn't read so great into this episode. He says, while the Bezdin is doing this, if somebody happens to come by one of these fields, he could take what he wants to. Okay, Bezdin is just doing us a favor and bringing us the produce. But if you're in Eretz Yisrael, and you go to see one of these fields, and it's a big sign, Kan Shem Shvius, okay, and you walk by, and it says it's an Eretz Bezdin. That doesn't mean you can't go in. You can go in and take the fruit anyhow. Bezdin is taking it for everybody, but you're one of everybody, and you could take it also if you wanted to. Okay.
Why, if they have it set up, if it's workers and they have a system, maybe you can't go in. It's hefker.
Right, it's hefker. So the reason is...
That's not a transportation system, a working system. Hefker is hefker.
Okay, and last is, everybody talks about this. If you look at the cases here, and the logical way of talking about of Otzar Bezdin is for fruit, because vegetables are svichen. Okay, vegetables don't fit into Otzar Bezdin because the vegetables are. If a cucumber grows, the cucumber is Otzar. So if an apple grows, it's mutter. We just need a way to get it to town.
Later on,
so
if you go beside the kita,
yeah,
that's svichen. You can make it as a vegetable.
So I was about to say is that we spoke about that Chazon has chidushim of how you can manage to get vegetables that are not svichen. There are ways to get vegetables and even grains. He talked about vegetables and grains. He talked about two different coolers about how you get vegetables and grains that have kedusha shvius but do not have the issur of svichen. It's quite an amazing feat. Okay, you should have kedusha shvius but not have an issur of svichen on them. We talked about that some time ago. Two chedushim, and in fact, people do that. So there's now Otzar Bezdin not just on the fruit, which is the logical way to have an Otzar Bezdin, on te'enim, anavim, tesim, that's what it says here, but not only that, but ways to get it on vegetables and grains also. The grain, I don't get it exactly, but the grains, it seems, only go from Meichel Behema, which is a big to-do. Okay, it seems that it's a big to-do, because people who have behemoths need to be able to buy food so they can feed it to their behemoths. That's quite a problem. So not only does the Otzar Bezdin work for fruits, which is the logical way, but they have found ways to use it for vegetables and grains also.
Elaborate. I mean, obviously it's Yibul Shishis, so we understand.
So if you want, I'll give it to you in short. We spoke about it then, which is for vegetables, you do what's called Zriya Mukdemet. You plant it before Shemittah. There's a machlokes Rishonim whether produce that was planted before Shemittah is the Isser Svicha or not.
That's the Chazon Ish.
I said it was Chazon Ish. I said two things from the Chazon Ish. And the second is, for grains, that doesn't work for grains. None of the Rishonim hold that if you plant grains before Shemittah, that they don't have the Isser Svicha on them. It's only for Yerakas. For grains, they turn the field into a stay-near by planting grain the year beforehand. And when you plant grain 1 year, then from a farming perspective, nobody would plant grain again. And the Chazon Ish, the second other kula, that's considered a stay-near, and that it's there's no Isser Svicha on the stay-near. And then when you do the Shita, then it has Kedusha Shvius, because it grew a third in Shemittah, but it doesn't have an Isser Svicha. Okay.